Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my podcast partner, Tom Laidlaw, the former NHL defenseman for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. And this is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. Come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey. And a lot happened over the last few days, Tom, and a lot to talk about, a lot to unpack. And I want to start, before we get to the trades, which is, I think, going to make the bulk of our show, I want to talk about the Department of Player Safety. And Evander Kane was suspended 3 games, his third suspension by the league. He was also fined earlier this year as well. And he came out and said that George Parros, who's certainly in charge of that, is, quote, ridiculous in how he metes out punishment. And there are other suspensions and non-suspensions that I want to get to in relation to that. But let's just start right there. What's your assessment of what Evander Kane says? Does he have a legitimate beef? Is this something that he should say? Is this like in basketball when a coach says you got to stay on him so you can get the next call? I mean, what exactly is going on here?
Yeah, to me that was an embarrassing comment by Evander Kane for a few reasons. George Parros. To me, it's very important to a few things. Not limited to this, but George Parros is a former player, was an honest player, a guy that stood up for his teammates, a very well-educated guy, went to Princeton, and is doing a really tough job, a job that no matter what, not everybody is going to be happy with the decisions you're going to make. Some people are going to think you shouldn't have been suspended at all. Sometimes people think it was too long a suspension. So he's in a no-win proposition. So for Evander Kane to come out and make that comment, to me, like, he's done some things in the past, and he's a fantastic athlete. I don't know the man at all, but he's done some things in the past that really question his understanding of what it is to be a National Hockey League player. You go back to things when he was in Buffalo, when he'd gone to a concert or something in Toronto, and it was late getting back to practice and all these things, and those comments. Like to me, it's just, okay, if you don't like the suspension, that's fine. I understand that. But to make a comment like that publicly about a former player and part of the National Hockey League while you're playing in the National Hockey League, to me, I don't think it serves some purpose to think, well, geez, they're going to go easy on me next time. That doesn't make sense to me. I don't think that George Parros is going to change his position on any next suspension that Evander Kane may get based on what Evander Kane says, good or bad. I just think that was an embarrassing comment for Evander Kane. I just think that's the wrong way to handle it. If you have a problem with it and you want to call up George Parros and have a private one-on-one conversation and call him every name in the book, go ahead and do that. But to do it publicly, I think is totally wrong.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's fine for a team to protest the suspension, but it wasn't the team. You're right. It was Evander Kane. And I understand players want to have their own rights to voice their own opinions, but, you got to really kind of know how the game is played. And that's just really not all that acceptable, in today's climate. Now, here's the one issue I would say. Now, I agree completely with you that it's a thankless job. And for the most part, through my long years of covering the league, I've sort of sided with the league because it is a thankless job. And no matter what your rule, I remember talking to Brendan Shanahan, and we were talking about a specific event. I believe it was involved Shea Weber, as I recall, and whether or not he would be fined or suspended. And he said, "What did you think it was?" And he said, "I said I thought it was one game." And he said, "Well, I thought it was a fine." He said, "But that's the difference between one game and a fine. Like, is that?" That's just an opinion. And I thought about that, and there's a lot to that. It's just oftentimes in the eye of the beholder. And there's another factor that's never brought up is that, you've got to be able to defend that to the Players Association based on past precedent.
Yep.
So what's happened in previous years matters. You got to be able to go back. If we say that a severe slash is 4 games for 20 years, a guy can't come in and then suddenly make it, 15 games unless, that it's fully understood and everyone's made aware of and everything
I
else.
was going to disagree with you there, but that comment at the end, yeah, I agree with you. You can change the rules, and they have, but you've got to let people know in advance that the rules.
Yeah, and it's got to be really spelled out. Like you can't just say, there's a new sheriff in town, so I'm going to be harder.
Right.
You can be a little harder because that's allowed because there's some gray area, but you can't be a lot harder. So all of that said, I think it's still like a difficult job. But I've had trouble sort of figuring out exactly what Peros is doing on some rulings. And I'll give an example. The Chara incident with the cross check to the face against Gallagher.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people in the league thought that was a suspension. Now, I could be wrong on that, but based on the people I've talked to, everyone thought he should have been suspended and that he might have got a little bit of a break there because, he's a star player and he's a good man. And
he doesn't have the history. He doesn't have the history.
He doesn't have the history.
Right.
But, boy, that was a tough one. And I know the defense of all that is, he's a big guy.
Yeah.
But, you've kind of know your limitations. If you're on the street and you're a 6'7" guy and a guy wrongs you and you punch him in the face and he dies, you can't say, well, I didn't, I'm just a bigger guy. When I punch a guy, this can happen. I mean, that doesn't work. And it's the same thing on a much lesser scale like this, even though he's a big guy and the fact that when he cross checks at his normal, it's face high, I felt that should have been suspension. But, again, one game versus a fine, like it isn't all that significant. So I get that George is probably, and I'm just like you, I covered George forever. And you talk about an intelligent guy. I mean, he's an Ivy League guy I believe he's got his degrees in economics. Like, this is a guy that knows what he's doing. So for me, I've just felt like, well, he's just trying to sort of find his way a little bit and, try to work in there. But I don't know. I just don't think that Evander Kane serves his best interest by popping off on that. It sort of fuels that reputation he has, is that he's more of a me guy than a team guy.
Well, so. I agree totally. And that's, I think you said it very well there. I just, I think if he doesn't want to get suspended, then don't put yourself in that position. If you watch the replay of that play, he clearly ran at the player. The player was along the boards and he had his elbow up and he hit him in the head. So I don't know how you can say, okay, like, why would you put yourself in that position? Lots of great players don't get suspended because they don't put themselves in that position. And they're still physical players. They still hit. They still play the game hard. I mean, I've talked about it so many times, but Patrice Bergeron yesterday, I watched him against the Rangers, and just this incredible player. He does all these little things, and he does them all so well and plays hard all the time, but he doesn't get suspended. He doesn't do things like that to hurt his hockey team. That's the thing that gets me. Like, and we talked about this before. I think we were talking about Nashville and a couple of weeks ago. I think it was Johansson did the same kind of thing, got an elbowing penalty. It was just a selfish play. Like, you're not thinking of your team, and that's, to me, there's a reason why San Jose, and I'm not putting all the blame on Evander Kane, but there's a reason why San Jose is not having a very good year this year. And they've certainly got the talent, but they're not playing like a team. They're playing selfish hockey, and that's one way of playing selfish hockey, by taking a penalty like that. He's too valuable a player. That's the thing. If he was a fourth-line guy you didn't care about, a borderline player, but he's a top six forward. He's a very valuable player for that team. So, yeah, just don't put yourself in that position as a player. And then when it happens, like I said, like, you're not going to be happy about it. But again, like I said, and it happens so many times that we don't hear about it. Call George Peros up if you want, or when you go see him in New York, walk into his office and have a screaming match if you want to. Close the door, and then nobody knows about it. If you want to voice your displeasure towards it, go ahead and do it that way, man to man. But yeah, that was bad play.
Or call them up and even don't scream. Like just have an educational meeting between a player who's playing the game, and explain your position, and maybe he did that at the hearing.
Yep.
But maybe there just needs to be a clarification. And life is based on learning from your mistakes.
Yeah.
And if you get caught for speeding a few times, you say to yourself, "Boy, I got to slow down, because the next one I get, I'm going to lose my license." Well, if you're Evander Kane and you've been dinged 3 times, you got to play just a little differently. Like, I understand that's that's hard because what makes Evander Kane Kane is that he does play on the edge, and you want him on your team. It's like I always said about Chris Pronger when he played. I never criticized Chris Pronger for going on over the line because he was exalted by all of us. Because he would go to the line.
Well, Brad Marchand's the same way. He's a fantastic player. Part of his game is pushing that limit.
Well, but it's interesting. Brad Marchand has never really been exalted. In fact, I think he's more disliked. Pronger was exalted. Everybody looked at Pronger and said, "Wow, I wish that guy was on my team." Where I think, and it may be social media plays a role in that. Now you could, Marchand is active on social media, and you can build up a dislike for him. I think if you're a fan, around the country, and he plays dirty. But Chris Pronger crossed the line multiple times. But he was a Hall of Famer, and
Scott Stevens the same way too. You look at some of the hits on Scott Stevens, but wow.
No doubt. But we exalted those guys, and so I'm not going to say, boy, that Pronger is a great player, a Hall of Famer, and then the minute because he's playing on the edge of the rules, he goes over. I'm suddenly going to say, oh well, let's throw the book at him.
Very true.
Although I have said that you got to kind of know where the line is, no matter where you play.
Right. I think those guys know where the line is, but that's why they're smart. They take it to that line,
right?
Because now they're thinking, okay, everybody else is kind of playing by the rules, so the rest of the players are all thinking, well, this guy really doesn't even care about the rules. He's willing to push it past the line, and he knows that he's doing it. So now there's that fear factor there. Yeah, I mean that's part of Chris Pronger, Scott Stevens' allure that you play against them. They're going, oh God, we have rules out here, but that guy's not afraid to get suspended. Right?
Yeah, no, I mean you see it in baseball all the time with pitchers. They're going to throw inside, and if they hit you, well, so be it. And that's going to be a big thing now with the way with the Astros getting caught, stealing signs. Are they going to throw at the Astros batters? I mean,
this season, I want to see what happens when they come into New York and places like that where they've potentially hurt the chances of winning a World Series with those other teams. So, how about Cassian too with them? Oh man.
That one is so hard because I want to get your thoughts on it because you know more about it than me. But I've always had the impression, Tom, that hockey players don't fear much; they fear cuts from skates.
Yeah.
Like they don't, and they are not sympathetic to a guy who kicks whatsoever. So I didn't understand that at all. I thought it should have been 10. The precedent in the past was sort of 5. And Perros sort of split the difference at 7. And
and you listen to Cassian's, and I like Cassian as a player. He's that hard guy. He sticks up for his teammates. I like him as a player. I really do. So I want to be careful when I say this. But he tried to say that he was trying to get his leg free or whatever. Well, his leg was free. He pulled back, and then that's when he kicked him.
No, I know.
And to me, it was one of those plays. It was a selfish play because it wasn't like he was mad. The guy hadn't punched him in the head. There was no retaliation going on. It was just he decided he was going to kick him, which is something you look at and go, you don't kick in hockey. We have skates on. It's a knife in your feet, right? So, people have gotten injured this year and other years by skate cuts. You go way back to Malarchuk, the worst one many years ago with the Buffalo Sabres. But to me, it just is one of those plays you're looking at him and going, what could you possibly be thinking? That's just a selfish play. You're not thinking about your team. You're not thinking about your opponents even when you do that kind of stuff. So, I mean,
I've heard players tell me that they thought the dirtiest play was the slew foot, but I always thought it was a kick.
Yeah. I can't even imagine, I've been mad at players out in the ice before and you get in a fight with them, whatever, but the thought process for me to go ahead and kick him. And again, like with Cassian, he wasn't even mad at the guy. That was the worst part. I just didn't understand it. It just was I think that's that play that, again, I've talked about certain teams that may be on the bubble, like we've talked about San Jose or Nashville should be doing better. Edmonton hasn't made the playoffs in years. And, to the team, and then you look at the teams that are successful and the way they play that team game and they sacrifice. If they get hit, typically they will, like you watched Pittsburgh play yesterday, man, they are playing great hockey. And it's just like they talked about the fourth line. It was right. They just sacrifice their work ethic. It's about, as Sidney Crosby and Malkin lead the way at that it's about, showing up and playing as hard as you can and thinking about the team winning. Whereas you see players like Kassian and Kane doing that stuff, and they're clearly not thinking that way.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Penguins, because I want to just start talking about the trade deadline. We're now almost a week away from it, and we had some trades over the weekend. The one that intrigued me the most, there were a couple of really good trades. But first of all, what we're seeing here, what I think anyway, and I want to get your thoughts on this, seems to me that hockey trades are back in style. And I think we're seeing GMs that say, hey, look, sure, rentals are nice, but it's better if you can make a trade that can help you not only now, but in the future. Now, the Penguins did that when they got Zucker. And when you figure that everybody's talking that Kreider is going to fetch a first-round pick and a prospect. Now, I don't know if that's true, but, you hear that. The Penguins gave up a good prospect and a first-round pick, but they got Zucker for multiple years. And Zucker fits well into what they do there. And they're, they even with Gunsel healthy, it seems like they're one forward short there because they have both Malkin and Crosby. They've got to accommodate with, quality scoring players. And Zucker, I think, fits really, really well. And then we move over to the trade between the Tampa Bay Lightning and New Jersey Devils. Blake Coleman, a player who's already reached the 20-goal mark again this year, 2 years in a row, a penalty killer, a power play guy, pretty quick. Got a lot going now. He fits perfectly into that Tampa Bay Lightning. And now they gave up Nolan Foote, who is Adam Foote's kid, and is that right?
I can't remember what they gave up. Yeah,
and a first-round pick. To get Coleman, but the first-round pick is the one they got from Vancouver in the JT Miller trade when they had to trade Miller because they had to create money to pay Braden Point. So, they had a guy back, and really what it comes down to is they ended up sort of trading JT Miller and Foote, for Coleman.
And they got rid of the cap space for the season, right? So,
and they got rid of that cap space, which is really, really important. So anyway, my point in all this is that I see, the farther along we go in learning the ramifications of trading away prospects and so forth at the trade deadline in a salary cap era, I think GMs, given their choice, would really rather make hockey trades and, get players that go beyond, just a rental.
Yeah. And especially these teams that are thinking, okay, we got a shot at making the cup or winning the cup, or we've got a shot at getting in the playoffs. We need that body. I just don't, we've talked about this before. I just don't see it work that often that you're adding that one piece to just the short-term gain, the short-term potential of win a Stanley Cup. I mean, I think more than ever, because of the parity in the league, it's so hard to determine. Look at last year, it was St. Louis winning the cup. Washington 2 years ago had, again, we've talked about, I think they had the least talented lineup they had in the previous 5 years. So I think these moves that they make for these short-term potential gains very rarely work. But I like like you said, the Zucker trade where you're okay. Yeah, we're going to help ourselves right now, but we're helping ourselves for the future as well. So to me, and I hear these comments about, okay, I'll make my decision based on where we're at. The week, statistic wise, leading up to, like a week before the trade deadline, and going, really? I mean, these GMs are smart guys, and I've heard a lot of intelligent guys that have been very successful make that comment, but are they really doing that? Or are they thinking to themselves, this, I need to think about, and I guess, I should be careful. I should back up when I say that too, because now I'm thinking about Columbus last year. There's a reason why Columbus did that, right? We've talked about that before. They needed to get in the playoffs. They needed to win a round. So that's a unique situation. But for most teams, you got to be saying, okay, I need to make a decision. Yes, I want to get in the playoffs now. Yes, I want to strengthen my lineup so that we can potentially win a Stanley Cup. But I still need to be thinking long term as well. And that's why, like you said, like with Pittsburgh there, they just seem to get it right all the time. They make that good move. They are playing so well too. When we watch them play on the weekend, they're just like that hard game. Like you can tell they bought into the system. They bought in what Sullivan's saying. And again, that comes from the top. There's no coincidence to me. You look at Pittsburgh playing so well and Crosby being the kind of leader that he has developed into. Same thing with Boston. We talk about so much with their leadership there. So I like the moves those guys are making. In fact, it's interesting. We've talked before about Kreider potentially going to Boston. And you watch, everybody thinks they need that one more forward. But man, I don't know. I guess it's the cost. What are you going to give up to get Kreider or any other player, like you said, especially on a rental?
Yeah, it's a tough. I think the Edmonton Oilers, and I've said on previous broadcasts that I think they're in the Columbus Blue Jacket situation this year. They're the one team where I would say, yeah, go for it a little bit. Pay some prospects because I think everybody needs it. I think the fans in Edmonton need a playoff appearance, and I think the National Hockey League needs Connor McDavid and Draisaitl in the playoffs as well. He's such a dynamic player. But I think everyone else, should err on the side of caution on this and not be giving away first-round picks. Now, saying that, the Andy Green trade is interesting because obviously he is a pure rental. Yeah. But the Islanders needed one more defenseman. He's a guy, I think he's a really fine defenseman. I think he's a guy you plug in and give you 20 minutes.
Leader.
Yeah, solid, dependable defensive player. He's not going to try to do more than he's capable of doing, but he'll do his job really, really well. They gave up, a really just a very average prospect in Quenneville, and then a second-round pick. Now, that's not insignificant, a second-round pick. But, from the Islanders.
Interesting, too. Lou Lamoriello now making a trade with Tom Fitzgerald and Martin Brodeur running the New Jersey Devils, right? So his old players. Wasn't Fitzgerald a player there as well? When Lou was there, I think he was. Certainly Marty Brodeur, right?
Well, Marty Brodeur was for sure. Yeah. But, he was born to play for Barry Trotz, don't you think? The Trotz defensive system. Yeah. So, that as much as I would prefer, acquiring players that can play beyond this season, I understand why Lamoriello did it, because I think, they're another team that, I think their fan base would appreciate a second-round pick to, have a little stronger playoff presence. So it does sort of work for some teams now, but, what's always lost in these situations is the impact on the team. Now, the sad thing is for the poor Devils fans is, I think they thought, I didn't, and I don't think you did, that all the deals they made last year had sort of moved them into another level. And now, all of a sudden, they're taking a half step back again. And, they're trying to convince someone to take PK Subban. And, whether or not that's possible, who knows?
Who's going to do that? Yeah, why would somebody do that? I mean, the way he's played this year, he's not going to help a team win a cup.
Yeah, well, that's a valid point, but you never know what'll happen. Everyone thinks they're the coach that can bring PK Subban back to his former self, and maybe they're short on offensive spark from the blue line and so forth. But anyway, the Devils have lost some pretty significant players. Like Coleman was an important part of their offense. Green obviously is an institution there, had been there forever, although it didn't seem like, he could go back there and re-sign. I mean, that's possible. But, they picked up, in the Taylor Hall trade and they picked up a second-round pick and 2 firsts. So, that'll help, down the road, but it's not going to help next year.
And that's putting people in the building now, right? I mean, it's a young team. They're going to be good, but it's going to take a while to do that. Yeah. How about the hit yesterday? Grubauer getting hurt, goaltender in Colorado.
Yep, and we're going to find out today if they haven't announced it already. I doubt it, though. It's a little early there, but what the extent of his injury is, and if he's out for an extended period, does that mean Ryan Miller is in play? Does that mean they call it? Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, you got to ask him, see how he feels about it. But I would like that. That would actually make a lot of sense. And would he be interested in that?
Well, see, there's a lot of discussion about that yesterday. Mike Milbury is commenting on it, so I don't really believe too much what he says anyway. So I don't think he knows what's going on. But he's got to be looking at it, and the Rangers are treating him fantastic. We talked about this before. He's treated the Rangers fantastic, so it's a two-way street. But he's got to be looking at that. If I stay next year for the last year of my contract, how much am I going to be playing? And these two goaltenders, unless they trade Georgiev, I don't think they're going to trade Shesterkin. But if they may possibly trade Georgiev, but I don't think they would at this point. So what is, he may be looking at playing 10 games next year. Is that the way he wants to finish his career, sitting up in the press box or on the bench the whole time? I just don't see that as especially if he can go someplace. And again, there's no guarantee, but you go to a Colorado with a good team like that and think, okay, am I that final piece, especially with this injury? Maybe this injury, they say, just like in Toronto, they say, okay, this injury kind of woke us up to the fact that we know we need to bolster our goaltending situation. It's just not good enough with this good hockey team we've got.
Well, it's true. And then the other name I would throw out there is do you make another call to the Blackhawks, and they'll have to decide whether they're in the hunt or not, because Robin Leonard is a goalie that I think teams have asked about all season long. He's had good numbers, has played well. He'll be an unrestricted free agent, but again, would Colorado be thinking with Lundqvist? Well, we'll get him in for now, and we can get him for next season as well. Because it's not like he's fallen off in terms of his playing ability. It's just he's got younger guys up there pushing him, and they're a rebuilding team, and it makes more sense for the Rangers to go with the younger players.
Yep, definitely. And I'll tell you, he's one of those professionals. He's constantly adjusting his game and his training because he knows he's getting older. So he's a proud man. If I'm Colorado, I'm going to go, I know what I'm getting here. This guy's a professional. He's a leader. He's like you said, he's always working on his game to get better and better. So it's not like you're saying this guy's just going to kind of ride off into the sunset and now we're stuck with him. So the question is, does he going to want to make that move?
Well, with the activity we had yesterday in the trade market, and now with the Grubauer injury, and I think we'll know more about that, I would expect, Tom, that over the next couple of days it'll start to feel like the trade deadline.
Yep.
Because there's sort of been a trend to try to do that early rather than later now.
Is that Barry Trotz calling you there?
Yeah, that could be just to let me know what their plans are.
We've got a couple of weeks here now where you have not even mentioned Barry Trotz too.
I know. I'm going to lose my Barry Trotz fan club membership over that.
No family right? I mean, it's like you guys didn't have a family reunion and you guys didn't show up or something.
No, there's been no fallout.
Right, okay.
No fallout whatsoever.
One thing we didn't talk about that we were going to talk about a while ago, the Arizona Coyotes are getting investigated for breaking the rules.
Yes.
So there's a rule where you cannot work out draft eligible players prior to the combine. So the league has a combine in Buffalo, I believe, correct? Where they bring in all the prospects and they're worked out. All the physical testing is done right in front of all the teams, and you cannot work out teams on your own prior to that happening. And apparently Arizona, it was like 20 players that were draft eligible that they went ahead and worked out.
Yeah. And I don't know. I mean,
how do you,
one part of me just says that's just so ludicrous. Like, why would you, violate the rules? Like, what advantage do you really feel you can get out of that? Number one. I mean, and on the other hand, I've seen people suggest that it should be, $250,000 for every, player or whatever it is. And I thought, oh my gosh, like
there's got to be some backstory there that we're not getting, because obviously everybody knows the rules. Why would you go ahead and think, it's not going to be kept a secret. All the agents and players are not going to, they're obviously going to tell people that it's happening. So we're missing something. It's going to be interesting to see when we find out.
And the other thing is, I've always, like what can you really learn from testing an 18-year-old kid whose habits are really, sure, every once in a while there's a kid that comes along that everybody knows that he's a fitness freak, that he's been that way since he's 16, years old. This started with Rod Brind'Amour, and since then we've had, players through the years. Everybody just said, wow, like this guy is going to be a beast by the time he gets there. But for the most part, you don't have any idea, because the kids' training habits really get established after they sort of turn pro and they sort of, get the gospel explained to them, and all of a sudden the light bulb goes on and now they become,
Yep.
They start living in the in the weight room.
Yep.
So I don't know. I just don't see why it's not worth. It doesn't seem to me that it's worth breaking the rules to get that knowledge. Like that knowledge is not power to me. I don't know how that makes.
Yeah, especially like the scale of it. They had 20 players. And so your first thought is, well, did they not know? Well, obviously they didn't know. It's not the first time this group of the people running that team have been through this. So it's not some new news. So I don't understand the concept. That's why I thought it was going to be interesting. We find out the real story. Maybe we don't find out the real story, but kind of.
I've always wondered about the whole, the scouting thing. And this is not an indictment on the scouts because I think they all kind of know what they're doing. But you only get now, what do we have? 7 rounds now on the draft, so you get 7 players.
Yep.
And you spend so much money,
millions of dollars, anywhere from I've heard from $5 to $10 million on scouting.
So you're spending all that, and yet their statistics show that once you get to the 3rd round,
yep,
you're down to 30%.
Yeah.
That only 30% of the players will make the league, and 20% in the 4th round will make the league. So if you just took Central Scouting's list, and you had one primary scout who went out and make sure that he knew everybody in the first, 40 picks, could you do just as well? I mean,
the other statistic too, I'll comment on that. The other statistic I heard that most teams look and say, well, out of the 7 picks they have or the 7 rounds, usually only 1 or 2 players a year become like regular NHL hockey players out of that draft. So you spend all that money, all that time. I don't know. I'm with you. To me, you know what I think is a bigger reason why teams are successful is their developmental programs once they draft them. So many of these players, like you just mentioned, their physical conditioning, their knowledge of the game, their preparation, all those issues. And again, the culture that they're going into, the work ethic that they've developed. I mean, you look at, I hate to, maybe it wouldn't have made a difference, but if Evander Kane came up in the Boston Bruins system, would he handle things differently? I just watch these teams and these young kids, like, you talk about Zdeno Chara and how he treats the rookies, like there used to be in those old days, the hazing or how the young players were treated differently. Zdeno Chara now, he says, no, you're coming in here and you're in the Boston Bruins. I don't care if it's your first year in the league or your 10th year in the league. You're going to be treated like a member of the Boston Bruins. I think the development and the culture they come into is important too.
Well, I would agree. And, there are, I just threw that for point of discussion. I certainly wouldn't do it if I owned a team. I think there's value to having your own guys who keep track of them. And I think that is important. And you look at like the Pittsburgh Penguins, Marino came out of nowhere this year as a later draft pick. And, I don't know what went on with that, but did one guy in the Penguins organization say in that round, what was it, 5th round, I think? 5th? Yeah. Say, oh, I've seen this guy. I've had 12 viewings, and I think he's a can't miss.
And that does happen, right?
Yeah, it does happen. I agree.
They fight for that player. They say, listen, I'm telling you, this is my guy.
Yeah.
No, he can't play. I watched him play twice. He said, I watched him play 20 times. I know he can play.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I think it is valuable. But I've often wondered that. It'd be an interesting, do a study if you ever, if the teams just had one guy that they hired who just went by the Central Scouting list and said, here, I'd take this guy. And he is each thing. And then they looked over that and see where those guys were. Now, like you said, where it would prove to be unscientific is that you don't have control over those players then. So, another team does. So with their training, but it would be interesting to see how somebody could do if they just, picked based on, the Central Scouting list or, their limited viewings of players. Anyway, we've gone overboard today, but you'll join us later in the week, I hope, to catch the Laidlaw and Allen report. I'm Alan. He's Laidlaw. We'll be back on Wednesday.
All right, guys. See you on Wednesday.